Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome, everybody, to the Marco Duray Show. It is Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. Thanks for tuning in today's show to hear all the relevant, groundbreaking news here in America and around the world, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Please don't forget to follow the show, folks. I really want to tell everyone to do that. Please make sure you're following the show. Share it with whoever needs to hear the truth in our quest to unwoke America. I really do appreciate when you are doing that. I do. I see the numbers growing too, so I appreciate all those that are sharing the show. But I hope you're all ready for the best hour radio has to offer. Uncensored and ready to go. Let's get down to brass tacks right away. I want to start off the show with something a little bit funny. It's not something serious, but I did find this a little funny today when I was reading it. It's in the New York Post. And it says here that Don Jr. eggs on the View host who promised to wear a MAGA hat if Trump got Israeli hostages freed. Oh, the View of ignoramus women. Now, he's referring, of course, to Alyssa Farrar Griffin, who made the following statements on the show previously. If Trump was able to, again, be successful in Ukraine and broker a peace deal, and, of course, if Trump actually got all the remaining living hostages freed. Here's what she had to say.
In Ukraine, and that's something I care deeply about. And I want Donald Trump to come around to perhaps continuing to support Ukraine and standing by the U.S.'s position. So my point when I say I'm not going to be apocalyptic, it's not changing a tune. It's not making every single thing a five-alarm fire. Yeah. If he does good, if he gets the Israeli hostages out, I promise I will wear a MAGA hat for one day on the show and say, thank you for doing it. Yeah. She'll knock it right off my head. But like you have to be able to cheer for wins when they happen and then call out relentlessly the wrongdoing.
Well, yeah. All right, so is she going to wear the hat? Nobody knows. We have no idea if she's going to wear the hat. But this has garnered some great attention, obviously. Getting lots of likes, getting lots of views. So it's only time to see if the ladies on The View hold up their end of the bargain. Obviously, it was just one of them. I think it'd be funny to see one of the hosts of The View wearing a MAGA hat on the program. I think that would just be like the funniest aha moment you could actually see. One of them wearing a hat, who all of them despise Donald Trump, by the way. They've never said one damn positive thing about it. Hopefully, at least she acknowledges that this is a good thing. I think they all really should, of course, that the hostages have been released. But wouldn't that be something if you saw Alyssa Farrar Griffin wearing a MAGA hat? Now, it's funny, too, to say that she used to actually work for the Trump administration. She worked in the, I believe, communications press secretary department for Mike Pence. So I think it's just a very funny thing if this actually happens on their program today. So we'll have to wait in and see about all of that. PJ Media had a good article in yesterday that I didn't get to go over because we were running short on time. But this one also refers to, obviously, the success that Trump had in garnering what seems to be at least a ceasefire. But, of course, getting every single one of the remaining hostages back to their families. But now the left is now trying to give Biden credit for Trump's ceasefire deal. Again, living in lunacy. It says here that ever since President Trump brokered this historic peace deal between Israel and Hamas, I'm going to correct this too. It's not a peace deal. It is a ceasefire deal. So we all need to be aware of that when we're talking about peace. This is not a peace treaty between the two nations, or excuse me, Israel and Hamas. But the left has now followed the predictable script, either praising the outcome while refusing to credit Donald Trump, or scrambling to hand the credit to someone else entirely. Of course. That's all they ever do. And that's exactly what Tony Dinkin did, the former Secretary of State. He now is what he is trying to do. This is just classic Democrats doing what they do. It's extremely funny, of course. So now the deal, of course, the releasing of the remaining hostages, and of course requires Israel to pull back to the predetermined line inside of Gaza, aiming to create what would be a buffer zone between them and, of course, to disarm Hamas. That's the next phase of this whole ceasefire plan. Now, again, I don't think Hamas is going to just hand over their weapons. I really don't think so. Unless there's some other massive type of security installation protecting them. Why would they hand their weapons over to anybody in the midst of what's going on right there, right now, which is perpetual war, bombing, famine, hunger, starvation, lack of medical care, lack of electricity in many cases, lack of food and water. Honestly, that's just ridiculous to even think that they would consider that. I don't think they're going to do that, but we will see how this works out. Regardless, in this self-congratulatory thread on X, Tony Dinkin actually tries to spin it and say that Trump brokered this ceasefire plan upon building on what Biden had supposedly achieved. Now, what was that? Absolutely nothing, because the whole war continued to escalate under Biden. He didn't do a damn thing to stop this. Even Kamala Harris, in her book that nobody reads, talks about this. I believe she talks about a meeting with when Biden and Netanyahu met back in July of 2024. And she addressed, of course, what was happening in Gaza to him. And his quote or his line as a response to all that was, well, I'm a Zionist. That's all he said. I mean, he's an idiot, first of all. He is an idiot. That's number one. He is an idiot. There's no other way to say it to them. But that's the truth about it. They did nothing to broker peace. Nothing. And they kind of talked about it, right? Either latent or non-latently. Kind of discussed what was happening inside Gaza. But they did nothing to stop it. They armed them whenever they needed it. And Biden didn't do anything to stop it. Yeah, they took jabs at the administration. But that's nothing. Absolutely nothing. That's just placating to your base. He didn't do a damn thing to stop anything that was happening. He didn't do anything to promote peace. Again, as I told you, he met with Netanyahu once the entire time, his entire 4-year presidency. But now what Dinkin is doing, he gushes about the plan, builds on a post-conflict framework developed under the Biden administration, is what he went on to say. I'd love to know what this is, by the way. And how come they couldn't do anything to stop this? As though the same crowd that has spent 4 years appeasing Tehran and, of course, lecturing Israel suddenly becomes the Middle East visionaries. Again, they appeased everybody. They didn't just appease Tehran. They let everybody do whatever they want to do. They let, obviously, the war in Ukraine get way out of hand. Absolutely. Right? Nothing ever quelled there. That just continued on. And again, talk is cheap. We know this. Talk is very cheap in this situation. Now, again, it's almost comical. The guy who spent his entire tenure presiding over one foreign policy blunder after another. Again, look at Afghanistan, for God's sakes, and then come and say, hey, you know what? Trump built on what we were doing. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. I mean, come on. It's not like President Trump came out and said, okay, what was the terms and, the plans that were put in place by the Biden administration. That never happened. That never happened at all. Now, we're going to do anything. Obviously, we have to give President Trump credit because this was something that, again, he and his administration laid out. There was no 21-point peace plan between the Biden administration and anybody. In fact, Biden wasn't even talking to any of these people, to be honest with you. Many foreign nations were not even speaking to the Biden administration. That's how pathetic it was. Here, at least, we're communicating. There's some actual diplomacy happening, and we're seeing that play out right now, which, again, I told you is a very positive thing. And again, hopefully it promotes lasting peace in the region. That's what President Trump is kind of speaking on right now. Again, we'll see how that all turns out. Again, I usually don't hold my breath with these ceasefires, unfortunately. I don't even want to read more of this to you. It's just a bunch of nonsense. It really is just a bunch of nonsense. To give them credit for this, while they were arming them the entire time. And again, the Trump administration continued to arm them as well. I told you my thoughts on this yesterday. I think Israel is exhausted with this whole thing. They're not achieving the success they thought they would in eradicating Hamas from the Gaza Strip. They're fighting a 7-front war. Their economy is in shambles. And I think this right now, this ceasefire, this pausing, is something they desperately need. Also, they're getting a lot of pushback in Israel from the population The families want their loved ones back. This is what they want. And again, they have really about 90% support of the Israeli people that say what they're doing in Gaza is fine. So you're not getting too much pushback from necessarily the war effort, although there are people there that are protesting. They want what's happening in Gaza to stop in Israel as well. And you see that too with some Jewish populations in the United States as well. So I think Netanyahu had to really get a lifeline from President Trump and say, listen, let's put this on pause. We'll get our hostages back. And then once we regain, we recover, we get more reserves back into the IDF and what have you, then we'll continue on with this conflict. And I think that's what you're going to see because, again, I told you yesterday, Netanyahu has never met a ceasefire he's agreed upon. He's broken every single one of them. We know that he wants Iran. He wants that war with Iran. But like the 12-day war, we had to get President Trump to come in and drop bombs. To do a little flex and, of course, say, all right, we'll stop if you stop. We'll make a ceasefire. Look, we stopped this. Look how great Israel did in this conflict. I mean, okay. Yes, parts of Tehran were bombed, but look at Tel Aviv as well. I think there was, 600 Iranians killed in those strikes? I think there was a few dozen Israelis that were killed in this. The Israeli people don't want this, by the way, this perpetual bombing of their country. And I think you're seeing a lot of people beginning to even leave Israel right now because they're just sick of this. They don't want to live like this. I mean, who could blame them? When you have a third of Tel Aviv destroyed, you have 2 of the 3 major ports, of their only ports rather, destroyed. That's going to greatly affect commerce and, of course, supply chain issues to the region, as you know. You had brownouts and blackouts during the whole thing because the Haifa refinery was hit. People don't want to live like this. Okay, this is the reality of the situation. People do not want to live like this. But again, it's just laughable to me to think that the Biden administration is taking credit for this when really it was the Trump administration that actually brought the people together, the necessary Arab states together at the UN. They sold the plan to Netanyahu, and Netanyahu agreed to it. Now, for whatever reasons they agreed to it, we'll have to find that out later, of course. I'm telling you what I think is happening based on the scholars that I listen to. But that's really what it comes down to. But for the Biden administration to take credit for this is simply a cheap shot, I'd have to say. They never once sought peace throughout this entire thing. Only everything they did escalated it. You're funding both sides of the war. I mean, classic situation. We see this constantly. The military-industrial complex gets much wealthier. War breaks out. Areas become destabilized. And then, of course, you take those people and you move them into Europe or the United States or parts of North America. We've seen this time and time again. It's the old classic bait and switch, I'd have to say. All right. Enough with the comedy. Let's move on to some more serious topics today. This is in Breitbart. And, Illinois Governor Jumbo Blimp Pritzker now suggests that Democrats may have to prosecute ICE agents. I laugh because it's so stupid. Do they not understand? They have absolutely no jurisdiction over federal agents. Even the Democrats in Congress, who are, again, federal employees, have no jurisdiction over this. You know why? Because ICE agents are simply following existing immigration laws that are on the books. That's what they're doing right now. Now, one can question maybe the way in which they're doing it. I know I have. But they're not doing anything illegal in that sense. It's just the way it is. Now, he's now suggesting, though, that, again, this is what he's saying. I'm just telling you. He's suggesting that Democrats may attempt to prosecute the Department of Homeland Security officials and immigration and customs enforcement agents for enforcing federal immigration law. I mean, this guy, I don't know. Does he ever read the Constitution? Does he know what the hell he's talking about? Not a clue. During an interview with Fox 32 Chicago this week, Jumbo Blimp Pritzker proposed prosecuting DHS officials and ICE agents for arresting illegal aliens, whom have zero right to be in the country, by the way. They did not come in the legal channels or proper means. In the sanctuary state, which, again, that's illegal. He's violating his own oath of office, again, which is to uphold the Constitution Instead, he makes it a bastion for illegal aliens in the state of Illinois. The tables will turn one day, is what the jumbo blimp told reporter Paris Schultz. Yep. These people should recognize that maybe we're not going to get prosecuted today, although we're looking at doing that, but they may get prosecuted after the Trump administration because the statute of limitations would not have run out. So they're already planning, again, on using lawfare to go after people they don't like, which, again, the Department of Homeland Security, whom secure our border, ICE, whom go into these communities and try to extract illegal aliens. Now, again, I told you before, I'm not a fan of the show me your papers business. I think that's completely unconstitutional and lacks due process. But arresting someone that does not have a right to be in this country and deporting them is not illegal, folks. It's not illegal at all. Tom Homan was sat down with Alex Marlow of Breitbart News, and he was questioned with this. I want you to hear what he has to say about all this, because he kind of addresses the situation at hand right now.
And when they act like you're actually the bad guy and you're the villain.
You're welcome. I don't care. But I'm going to say this. You're welcome. Because ICE has taken thousands and thousands of public safety threats off the streets of California.
Yeah.
President Trump saved LA. I was in LA when that all started. You know, people say, oh, I saw racial profiling. No, I was there. I was running an operation. We were serving criminal search warrants as part of a criminal investigation and cartel funding, money laundering, tax evasion, all that stuff. And all of a sudden people, no, you're just here looking for people looking different, looking for brown people. It was ridiculous. Then it started. You know, the protesting, the protesting turned violent, the damage to government property, the attacks on ICE officers. I was there. And after 2 days, when Governor Newsom wasn't doing anything, and Karen Bass wasn't doing anything, President Trump sent in the National Guard. President Trump saved LA. But you would think, whether it's Pritzker, Newsom, Bass, Brandon Johnson, you're welcome. Yeah. We made your community safer. If you want to sit on the sidelines and watch us make your community safer, then have at it. Shame on you.
There we go. They're absolutely right. Absolutely right about this. They did absolutely nothing. They could have cared less. Now, everyone has a right to protest. No one says that. But you do not have a right to accost or assault federal agents. That's what it comes down to. We saw this out in Camarillo in California, in Ventura County. They showed up to a migrant farm. They detained 10 different people, 2 of whom were minor children working on this marijuana farm. Nobody saw a problem with that, of course. Arrested them as they're leaving. A crowd of people just happened to show up out in the middle of nowhere, throwing rocks, trying to damage government property. And nothing is done by Gavin Newsom about this. Nothing at all. It's totally fine. It's totally legitimate because I told you this before. I'll tell you it again. These are his people. He said it before. Illegal aliens are his people. J.B. Pritzker, he doesn't even have to say it, but that's exactly what he's insinuating. They are protecting the illegal alien, the non-citizen, over the citizen in this country right now. They're allocating money to help them in legal woes. Your taxpayer dollars. You are funding your own demise, folks. That's what, this is what's happening right now. But he's absolutely right. The language coming from the left about federal agents who are, again, enforcing existing lawful immigration laws is pathetic. They are showing you exactly where their bona fides lie. And it's not with you, the American citizen. I'm sorry to tell you that, but that's the damn truth about it. It's unbelievable, too. I can't understand this. We are either we're a sovereign nation. Obviously, we have borders. But we're a sovereign nation that respects existing law, or we're a lawless nation that has no sovereignty and has no borders. And again, I don't even know what you would call that. It's going to be a big mess, I can tell you that much. But the idea that the Biden administration can usher in anywhere from 12 to 20 million illegal aliens, and then, of course, the left acting like they're the victims. Again, if you're here illegally, you have no right to be here. You're violating sovereign U.S. laws. People will shoot back at that and say, well, it's just a misdemeanor. It doesn't matter. You're here illegally. You have no jurisdiction to be in this country. What you're doing is against the law. Again, I'm not trying to say everyone that's here illegally is a nefarious or bad person. Don't misunderstand me. Or they're subhuman or anything that the left tries to put on people. Don't misunderstand me here. But we have to be a nation of laws, because then what this creates is a second class of, I guess, status in this country where people are maneuvering behind all the legal channels. How are you going to be able to drive to work if you're an illegal alien? You have to get a driver's license either illegally or you have to get a fraudulent ID. So you're driving with a fraudulent ID. That's against the law, is it not? Now you're working under the table. You're not paying taxes on that. That's against the law, too. I mean, again, there's so many things that are wrong. What's going on here? And then they come in and say, well, these are the jobs nobody wants to work if you take away these jobs. Yeah, because they're being exploited because they don't have a right to be here. That's what's happening. And again, shame on the businesses for doing that as well. They are exploiting people throughout this entire process. And the left doesn't seem to think there's anything wrong with it. There's everything wrong with it. There should be standards for one group and then not for another. And again, you shouldn't be exploiting one group and then another. But the other problem that comes with this is that because of this, illegal alien workforce that we have in some of these different sectors, think agriculture, think, what have you, you're actually bringing down the wages for people that are working in that field as well. So understand that. I mean, again, you have to follow existing immigration law. President Trump ran on this, and they're simply following existing immigration laws. There's nothing wrong with doing that at all. So I wanted to share that with you as well. And it seems like they're not deporting enough people, again, based on the population. We have roughly 50 million illegal aliens living in the country right now. We have anywhere between 50 and 55 million illegal visa holders in the country right now. So, it's a whole problem. It seems to be getting out of control. But you have roughly 100 million people in this country that have absolutely no right to be here. You don't think these people will vote? I guarantee, as sure as I'm sitting here, if you can get a driver's license, like in the state of California, and again, you can go to another state and trade that out for another ID, of course, I think they're voting in elections. Just a hunch, folks. Just a hunch. I'd have to tell you. Well, I love it. No, it's illegal for them to. Yeah, right. Please. They tried to make it legal in New York City, didn't they? Just recently. It's insane what they try to do here in this country. But again, it's all to destroy the fabric of the country. That's what this comes down to. They want to destroy the demographics. They want to put one side against another. And in the end, the elite run away with everything. That's the way it works. That's what they're trying to do. It's subjugating America. That's what it is. That's all it is, folks. That's all it is. And they'll try to get it too. Believe you me, they'll do everything they can to get it. All right, I want to move on to another article in the Expose News right now. I was going to read this to you yesterday, but again, I ran out of time. But I want everyone to be aware of what's going on, especially in the global food supply, which again is a major issue to everybody listening. It says here that Gates and Rockefeller fund a report which describes a power grab of the global food system. What could this possibly be? What could possibly come as a result of these wonderful philanthropists that we're seeing, like the Gates, the Rockefellers, the UN, the World Economic Forum globalists, who really want to control and take over the world food supply, of course, and of course, what you put on your plate. Yep. Now, Leo Hohmann wrote about this as well, and it's a good article. And I think you all should read this, but they're trying to besiege what we really eat in terms of our options. They don't want you to have sustainable, pasture-raised, whole foods like eggs or beef or chicken or wild-caught fish or anything of that nature. They want you to have lab-grown foods. And again, there's this global push to now reshape agriculture the way it works. I told you before, again, it goes right back to the article I read for you on Friday. The small farm in New Jersey, the family's lived on the farm for 175 years. And now all of a sudden the local government comes and says, you know what, we're going to take your farm. We're going to kick you off. Goodbye, thanks for everything. And we're going to make affordable housing units on your property that your family has lived on for generations. Oh, thank you for, managing your farm for so long. We're going to take that too. Yeah, they're going to leave them with I think 40 cows, a handful of sheep and what have you. They wouldn't be able to sustain themselves. They'd go out of business, and of course, then they take all the land. That's the way it works. And that's what they're trying to do to the small farmer in this country. So if you're going to, farmers markets or buying direct through local farms, that's a good thing. I always tell you it's very important to know your farmer. If you can, I know some people probably live in the cities too. It's more difficult. But if you're making a connection between you and who is producing your food and where exactly your food comes from, how it's processed, how the animals are raised, what's being fed to the animals, are they getting any type of injections or hormones or what have you, that's important because there's so much being put into the food supply in terms of what the animals eat or what's being put on the vegetables. It's very important you know where your food's coming from. I told you before, Bill Gates has been the one in this push for what's called APEEL, A-P-E-E-L. And what that is putting this texture on the outside of the food. And it's seeping into the food, and it's causing all these types of problems, of course. I'm not going to get into that much today. You can look into that further on your own. But I want to talk to you about, again, this global war now on our food supplies that continues to chug along under the radar while no one's paying attention to it. And we need to pay attention to this. This is a big problem. Now, the biggest place where this has kind of become really apparent is the World Economic Forum. Now, some of you know that this is a front group, of course, for the globalists, right? The people that make all the wonderful decisions for us. But they're very, very open about what they want for us. Now, this is just one example. I'm going to play you a couple different ones because I want you to hear from these people. But these are the ideas they want to implement. They're going to do it slowly. It's not going to be all at once, but it's going to be a slow incrementation of how they change things in the food supply. I don't know who's speaking right now. He's a part of the World Economic Forum, but listen to the language that he's using. Again, it's very telling about where they want to take us.
It's a very important point that you are addressing. My daughter, 24, inspired me and said, Dad, how can you advocate for these zero-carbon value chains if you still eat meat? And so I stopped eating meat. Now the math would say, well, you need to stop eating meat 11 years to compensate for a flight to Thailand. Yes, but if 1 billion people stop eating meat, I tell you it has a big impact. Not only does it have a big impact.
Wow, big impact. Hey, if you just stop eating meat, everything in the environment's going to go back to normal. Everything's going to reset. You have to worry about anything else. Just stop eating meat. Hey, stop eating meat, right? Cows, they defecate, they put out methane into the atmosphere, and it's causing this global meltdown of temperatures, right? Now, if you ask these people, hey, how much methane's in the atmosphere right now? Go ask these people. Go ask this klutz right here. How much methane's actually in the atmosphere? Right? You're saying it's causing this warming trend, which is going to make life uninhabitable. That's their big motif that they always keep trying to sell us. But how much methane's in the atmosphere? Well, the answer to that, folks, is 0.0003%. Do you think cattle, livestock is the problem here? No, of course not. Why would it be? But then they say, well, okay, all right. Well, what about your automobile? What about the jet? Remember, he says he's flying on a jet, wherever the hell he's going. Who cares, by the way? Get lost. What is the jet putting out? One jet ride, by the way, and this is why these people are such hypocrites. One of these jet rides, with these planes that they use, right? In one of these trips, just one trip, puts out more emissions than your automobile does in an entire year. So when they fly all around the globe, John Kerry was asked this once too. He was Biden's moronic climate envoy, right? well, what I'm doing is very important. Shut up. Please, shut the hell up. Doesn't even know what carbon dioxide is. God knows. But this is what they're pushing. Too much carbon dioxide. It's causing a warming trend. It's causing a meltdown. And, of course, the cattle are causing this as well. So we got to, end farming. Farming's got to end. It's over with. Don't worry about it. Get ready for lab-grown meats. That's what they want to push us into. You think I'm joking? Of course I'm not joking. That's what they're trying to do. And Bill Gates is funding this too. Look at what Beyond Beef is. Lab-grown meats. They use these cultures from God knows what. And again, the push, and again, he didn't say it specifically in this, but there's a push to start eating bugs. I know it sounds gross. I know you're saying, no way they would let us do it. No way. Oh, okay, all right. You don't believe me? All right. Well, listen, look at this. Go look up Nicole Kidman. Type in bugs. Go on YouTube. Go on whatever search engine you have. You'll find it. And she's eating these bugs. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Now I know why Tom Cruise divorced her. I mean, this is sickening. And it's dehumanizing, too. Who would eat bugs? Well, there's certain animals that are supposed to eat bugs. We are not those animals, folks. We're not supposed to eat that. And by the way, eating bugs causes cancer. Now you can see why the push for this is so important. But the idea that we're going to go strictly from a carnivore diet or an omnivore diet, whatever you want to classify it as, and ship into this eating bugs, eating vegetables only, is not going to be sustainable for anybody. It's just not going to be sustainable. This is the whole thing. And of course, they use the climate as the pretext for it. We've got to do this, or otherwise the climate's going to melt down. We're not going to be able to live. The world's going to become a frying pan. Remember they kept saying that? The world's going to become a frying pan. I just looked online today. 43 years ago, Dan Rather, I think he was on ABC, All Bullcrap Channel. Yep, that's what he was on. And he said, in a couple years, the Florida Keys are going to be gone. I think they were predicting by the year 2000, they're supposed to be totally underwater. Now, last I checked, folks, they're still there. They're still completely fine. There's been no significant sea level rise anywhere in the world. Usually, if there is, it's like a millimeter, 2 millimeters difference. In some areas, it's lower. But you're being told all these lies, all these lies. You're told carbon dioxide is bad for the environment. Well, first of all, without carbon dioxide, we don't have plants. So this push for, a net zero emissions for carbon dioxide, again, being pushed by Bill Gates, it doesn't work, folks. We need carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Without it, we would not live. And by the way, the atmosphere contains 0.4% percent of the entire atmosphere is carbon dioxide. I highly doubt it's causing a global meltdown. Just thought I'd bring that up to you as well. One other thing I want to share with you is just, again, this push, and one of the people that's really been vocal about this, and has been for quite some time, his name is Christian Westbrook, and he's really been adamant about following who these people are, what they are doing, and what they want to achieve, and how we have to really speak up and protest against this, otherwise we're going to be losing everything. So I want to play you a little clip of him and hopefully promote him and his work as well right now to you. But again, this is happening. And again, he presented this back in 2020. And we're starting to, again, see this slow implementation of these trends they're trying to push at us right now.
When we look at the technocrats, generations, as I said, of people have talked about the goals to control the population through the use of food. Henry Kissinger, we all have heard the quote, control food and you control the population. We've also heard, for instance, Bertrand Russell explain that it will be a combination of diet and injections and injunctions that will form this palpable human of the future that the state can do whatever they want with, and they won't even be able to resist. And so they have certainly telegraphed their intentions to use food as a vector, as a weapon. And now, as you say, in this 2020, as this scandemic really takes all of the technocratic agendas, all the Agenda 21, 2030, everything, biodiversity, all of these things that have been set in motion and paths that have been put there are now being just a blitzkrieg as the technocrats roll on all of these fronts. And food is, yes, absolutely one of them. This year, we've seen a tremendous effort on, I'll call it two different fronts. There's sort of a long-standing agenda to gradually, through manipulating the production and the supply chain, change what's available to people at the same time as they're socially engineering people away from eating foods that we've known in the past. They're pushing us towards these fake lab-grown meats, synthetic, weird, just transhumanists is the best way to, they're separating us from all that is good and natural and from God. And when you look at food, being human, because we have to eat every day, food is absolutely a very core part of being human. And so,
okay, so he goes on. I mean, it's a long interview. I'm not going to play the whole thing for you. But his name is Christian Westbrook, and this was on Rumble. It's called Food Wars and the Engineered Destruction of Our Food Supply. One thing he brings up, which is very important, that I want to kind of reiterate on, is the push during COVID at the start of 2022, when this all kind of came into. What you ended up seeing, and I saw this, and again, it was very troubling, but you actually saw people destroying their crops. I didn't understand it at first. I said, well, why are they doing this? Well, because they were starting to put limitations on food processing, food production. We saw that big push. So what they were doing was they were just simply grinding down their crop. There was a farmer in California in the Central Valley, just grinding down I think he was producing peas, if I'm not mistaken. He's grinding it back down into the ground, destroying all that. I saw farmers destroying, just killing, slaughtering their pigs. And again, I couldn't make any sense of it. I said, why are they doing this? What's going on? This was the push. This is what they're trying to do. They're trying to destroy the food supply. One other point of interest, too, and he talks about what I was just telling you about, how they want to push us into lab-grown foods or bugs or other things that are absolutely disgusting and really have no business being in our food supply. The other big push that they are using, and again, this one is, again, very, very crucial. They are trying to destroy the food processing plants. Now, some of you may watch this. Sometimes I talk about these things. But since Biden took office, there was 111 different food processing plants, right? Where the raw material goes, whether it's beef, whether it's walnuts, whatever the hell it is. They were destroyed and they weren't rebuilt. So now you have, again, this power consolidated between these bigger companies now. There was a dairy farm, I think, with upon thousands of cattle. Apparently it exploded. Now, I don't know what the hell it can explode on a dairy farm that would cause a barn to erupt in flames like that and explode. Or why overnight you're seeing thousands of cattle just hunched over dead with no apparent reason. They try to use, well, it was really hot out that day. It was 100 degrees at night. I just go, okay, it was 100 degrees at night. This happened in Kansas, by the way. 100 degrees at night. Rancher wakes up in the morning. Every little bit of cattle has been just dead. Keeled over, dead. I thought to myself, okay, well, if they had no access to water, that could be a reason for it, but they're all hunched on top of each other, and it's nighttime, and again, it's still warm out. I go, how did this happen? They all just died at one time? Something's a bit odd there. I'd have to share that with you. It's a bit odd. And I said, well, the test would be, did this happen to other farms in the region? Of course, nobody could answer the question. Now, people are saying, well, this is fat cattle. It's bigger. The can't sustain. I go, that doesn't mean anything, first of all. Now, if they've gone days without water and it gets extremely hot, then you might start to see livestock dying off. But cattle's pretty resilient. They can handle being crunched together. They can handle being in these dry conditions for a long time. It's not recommended, of course. But they can withstand this heat for a long time. And one day of it is going to cause thousands of cattle just keel over overnight. Something's odd there, folks. Just thought I'd share that with you. Something's a bit odd. So they're trying to find ways to control the food supply. This is what they're doing. And they seem to be pretty successful with it, too, because, again, you're seeing this collection of power from smaller farms and, of course, smaller processing plants to bigger. Think Tyson, think Smithfield, think Cargill, think JBS, all these things. And again, once it gets in the hands of the very powerful, very collected, and they start making decisions, well, we're going to start adding some bug powder into your cereal now. Oh, we're going to take away, the soy protein. We're going to add in some, cricket powder. That's one of the things, too, by the way. If you start to see numbers in your ingredients, that's what it is. Again, this is why I tell you should always search for organic products and know where your food's coming from. Because this is the push they're trying to do. Cricket powder, folks. Of all things, cricket powder. Then again, I told you before, eating bugs increase the risk of cancer. So that's the push. That's what they want to do. God knows what lab-grown meats would do. I mean, you talk about disgusting. I don't even understand. Why would you do that? Why would you want to do that? It's completely dehumanizing. That's what it comes down to. Dehumanizing you gets you to go along with their plan. Now, they're not going to stop eating me. You think they're going to stop eating me? Bill Gates, the biggest owner of farmland in the country? Nah, he'll still have his ribeyes and, filet mignons and porterhouses while you're eating bugs to save the climate while they fly around the world in their jets laughing at you. Yeah. No, not me. I won't be going along with that, thankfully. All right. Let's move on. Yesterday I talked about this article about Gavin Newsom putting together, and it was from Breitbart. He's putting together a commission, this little legislative group, to look into implementing reparations for blacks in the state of California. And I told you yesterday about how completely stupid that was, because it makes really no sense that they would do something like this. It doesn't make any sense that Gavin Newsom should do this, because California was never a slave state. It was always a free state when it was admitted to the Union in 1850. So the fact that he is, again, pandering to the most idiotic elements of his base, really to look good for 2028, because he wants to run for president. But I found this article. Paul Kirk Roberts wrote it. And again, Paul Kirk Roberts, he's bringing you the best facts. So I wanted to read a little bit of this to you so you can understand this. But one of the things that, again, I thought was hilarious was he links this audio clip from CNN. And it's Abby Phillips. And she's about as clueless as you can get. I'd have to say. And I don't mean that to be insulting. But she has absolutely no idea what she's talking about on this issue. Go figure, right? So I want to play her speaking about this to you. This is the narrative they try to push out about slavery in America. And, of course, this is why America's a terrible place, of course, mind you. But here's what she has to say. I'm going to play you about a minute of it. This is the introduction, and then she goes into a panel, and they start talking about slavery, and Donald Trump is trying to whitewash slavery in America, and all this other nonsense. But listen how she speaks about slavery in the beginning. I want you to take a listen to this, and then I'm going to break it down to the reality of slavery, what actually happened in America. Take a listen.
But on this topic, it's important to say objectively, slavery was indeed bad. It was evil, the nation's original sin. And it is impossible to understand the true history of this country without fully grappling with slavery's impact. Simply because of their birthplace and the color of their skin, the bodies and spirits of black men, women, and children were exploited for profit and power. They were forced onto ships, bound by shackles and collars that ripped off their skin. One older man described it as iron entering our souls. Some chose to jump into the waters infested with sharks rather than feel that iron. Now, once they arrived on this very soil, they were forced to work by way of the whip, despite being starved, sleep-deprived, threatened, tortured, physically and psychologically. They were auctioned off, humiliated, fearful, and separated from their families and their children.
Okay. So that's Abby Phillips' version of slavery. That'd be the very similar version you probably would have read if you were in high school, if you're learning about it for the first time. That's pretty much the idea you would get. And she's painting the picture of it's a white European thing versus a black African thing. Simply because of how they looked, their race. That's why they were brought here in chains, of course, to work by the whip. And that's what she's painting for you. Now, it's a much more different history, though. I have to tell you this. Because she's absolutely wrong about this. And I'm going to explain to you why, of course, because I do my research, and I want you to understand the reality of what slavery was and how it actually came to in America. So he starts off by saying, this is Paul Craig Roberts now writing about this, and it says, African rulers virulently opposed British anti-slavery efforts. Now, some of you might go, well, wait a minute, what does that mean? That doesn't make any sense. Why would the African rulers oppose this? That doesn't make sense. It was the evil whites went down there, captured blacks, brought them here, auctioned them off, whipped everybody, starved everybody, raped everybody. I mean, this is the narrative they try to push to you. And that's not to say that inhumane things did not happen to slaves. I'm not saying that at all. But this idea that this was just simply the norm does not make any bit of sense at all to those that understand real history. So he starts out by saying, Taki Theodorakopoulos, excuse me, my Greek's a little off today, knows his history. African tribes conducted slave wars on one another prior to the discovery of the Americas. So let's stop and think. Before any slave came to America from Africa, slave was already being conducted in these wars between one another and these tribes in Africa, enslaving one another. That's the exact same history of civilization, of what happened in Europe, what happened in Asia. So nothing new was happening. Middle East, of course, as well. Think of the Arab slave trade as well. This was the way of life, sadly enough, but this is what was happening. So now the conquering of others and enslaving them released the warriors of the successful tribe from ordinary work, thereby permitting them to concentrate their full time on their fighting ability, is what he goes on to say. He says the surplus slaves were then sold for revenues to the Arabs, or depending on the time of history, to whomever the customers were. Think about the Europeans entering into the slave trade as the Americas are forming, both North and South. Now, the smartest of the African tribes conducting the slave war traded those enslaved to the Muslims for firearms, thus giving them an advantage in the black African slave war. So now they're using firearms versus swords or, what have you, spears. Think of things of that nature. So now the vast majority of blacks that ended up in the New World, that'd be North and South America, were provided by the Black King of Dahomey. That was one of the big slave trading tribes at the time. It's in modern-day Benin. And so many of these slaves were themselves formidable warriors defeated in battle. Now, despite the fact that black slaves were brought to America by slave traders, financed by the Jews, so this is Paul Craig Roberts talking, he's absolutely right about that. And despite the fact that Muslims were the main customers for black slaves long before there were any white people in North and South America, today American blacks adopt African and Muslim names. As Taki says, it is like Jews adopting Adolf as their favorite first name, or Palestinians naming their newly born Bibi. He's got a sense of humor, this guy. This is funny. Now, here it is. It's just totally ignorant. This is indoctrinated. This is the product of American education. That's what he goes on to say. Giving us the facts as CNN, the lie machine itself, the crime news network, invents them. Now, again, Abby Phillips claims that blacks were enslaved by whites for no other reason than their skin color, and they would have just jumped into shark-infested waters rather than be forced to work by the whip. That's the image they're giving you. And again, you can see this in other movies that Hollywood puts out. Again, it goes back to this idea of, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and again, the propaganda in that book as well, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But here we go. We have the stupidity of this woman on CNN is beyond comprehension. Rather than be a valued investment doing agricultural work and carefully treated for their investment, the slave represented to the owner, the slave preferred to be eaten by sharks. This is the mentality of CNN. It's absurd. It really is in and of itself. So now he goes on to say, a year or so ago, I read an article in the City Journal. It was about a white slave owner in the Caribbean who owned 50 black male slaves who worked on his sugar plantation. The author raised an interesting question. Who was the real boss? The lone white man or the 50 black men? some of who were highly trained fighters. Think about what Paul Craig Roberts just reiterated to us, that many of these men that were, again, enslaved by the other black Africans, they had already been warriors that were defeated in war. And by the way, this happened in the Americas too, before the Europeans got here with the Indian tribes that were here prior to us. They went to war for wealth, for gold, for women, for land, for the resources in the land, all these things, all the reasons everybody went to war back in the day. And the winners would either wipe out the tribes or they would enslave them. Same process. Again, I told you this was a universal thing. Slavery. Unfortunately, this is very true up until very recently in our time. But they make it, again, white versus black. This is how they push these things. But here's the real question here. Who was the real boss? And it totally made me remember Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained. If you'll remember the scene where, what's his name? Calvin Candy, I believe was his name. Leonardo DiCaprio's character. He says, why don't they kill us? And then one of his, they're all kind of just looking at him. He goes, why didn't they kill us? He goes, I'm going to kill this guy right away if he was doing that to me. Now, for the answer is right here, though, of course. Now, for the simple-minded and easily indoctrinated Abby Phillips of CNN, a product of the CNN lie machine, is really so ignorant that she believes people without a labor force other than the already enslaved people for which they pay a high price. Purchase them not for their labor, but in order to beat them. That's what she thinks is happening right now. Whip them with their whips, rape their wives and daughters, and thereby make their huge investment in their labor absolutely worthless. If this was the norm, is what Paul Craig Roberts is articulating here. If this was the norm, that day after day you're beating, starving, raping, killing your slaves, your investment in your labor and your plantation or whatever the hell it is absolutely worthless. And thereby you would fail as a big agricultural producer and likely be murdered by angry blacks who outnumbered whites 50, 100 to 1 in many cases. He goes on to say, as I've previously reported, in Abe Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was a war measure, right? Everyone says this freed the slaves. It did not. It freed the slaves, actually. It was simply an executive order in 1863. It was simply a war measure intended to produce a black slave revolt in the entire South, thus causing the Southern troops to desert the front lines, to rush home in the defense, of course, of their wives and children. But guess what? Didn't happen. Not a single Confederate soldier left the front lines. And again, the war criminal in the White House, Abe Lincoln, believed the propaganda in Uncle Tom's Cabin. That's, again, where a lot of these things are pushed, of course, professed from. Truly one of the most evil of all propaganda tracks. Really, the slaves did not revolt. Why? Well, because they were not treated as the Northern propagandists reported. That's why. Now, indeed, in many cases, these slaves themselves ran the plantation. Black overseers were common. Imagine blacks whipping other blacks. I mean, again, this is the mentality of CNN. Again, that's not to say anything that's happening is right or owning someone is right. I'm just telling you the reality of the situation here. This is how things ran. This is how things worked. And of course, slavery is an awful institution, and it should be abhorrent everywhere. But you notice they don't say anything about the 18 or 19 countries in Africa right now where slave trading and owning a slave is legal. They don't say a damn thing about it because it destroys their narrative. The narrative has to be white versus black versus white. That's the way it's got to be. This is the push they do. And again, they teach it to you at a young age. There's obviously hostility and what have you. But today in American universities, now reduced to anti-American propaganda machines, reside America's real enemies. Our enemies are not George H.W. Bush. Our enemies are not George W. Bush's chef, a recently deported victim of ICE's lack of judgment. But America's enemies are white liberals and the woke left and Israel. Paul Craig Roberts telling you this, folks. And again, he's saying Israel not in the sense of Jewish Americans, but he's saying Israel in the idea of Israel controlling our politics and, of course, our foreign policy and getting us into wars which we really don't have to be in. That's what he's talking about. He's not talking about Jewish Americans who love this country. And there's very many of them, too, by the way. Just wanted to reiterate that to you. And yet, their enemies really are America's problems, right? This is the problem. We have an institution that's producing nothing but lies. You have a news media that's producing nothing but lies to you, warping reality. That's the truth of the matter. And that's why this thing is so stupid with Gavin Newsom. You have a state that was never even a slave state. Not one slave was in the state of California after its creation. Not a one. And he is setting up a reparations board to take your taxpayer dollars to give to somebody who was never a damn slave. And I can prove that. Ready? If you were a slave, raise your hand. Okay. Guess what? Nobody raised their hand. There you go. And if you owned a slave, raise your hand. Yep. Nobody raised their hand either. Because it's so stupid. And again, this pushes you. Whites have to pay blacks. Blacks, every single black was obviously a victim of slavery. More whites, in the terms of history, folks, more whites were put into slavery than any other group of people. Just thought I'd share that with you as well. But this is what they want you to think. This is what they want you to think. And by the way, I was reading this Snopes article afterwards. And at one point, it was talking about black slavers in America, too. They don't ever mention that to you, of course. That would just destroy the entire paradigm. But it is true that there were blacks that were slaves, and of course that there were blacks that owned slaves. And again, it really makes you shake your head when idiots like Gavin Newsom get up there and say these stupid things. But one of the things that was in these 9 points, and it said that in 1830 in America, there were 3,775 free blacks in America who owned 12,740 black slaves. So there were white slaves, there were black slaves, of course. We know this is true. And there were also slaves of any other race as well. It was not a racial issue. I know they want to paint it to you as that. It's totally a white versus black issue. It was not. There was not. There was indentured servitude of whites in America. There were blacks that owned blacks. There were blacks that owned whites. There were Indians that owned blacks. Yeah, didn't hear that one either. Yep, look at this one. American Indians owned thousands of black slaves. Yep. How do you get around that one? How the hell do you get around that one? And at the time of the founding of the country, there were 60,000 free blacks. So certainly not everyone is in the situation where they were enslaved the entire time this nation was founded. Look at this. I mean, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. The lies they tell us. But I love this. The part of this that ends it, and I'll finish off the show with this. It says here, white people ended legal chattel slavery. And of course, Snopes has to give you this pathetic answer. It says, it is rather self-serving to claim that white people ended chattel slavery in the United States, given that the overwhelming majority of blacks in the U.S. could not vote. So wait a minute. Every institution was owned by whites, or ran by whites at least, and no blacks were in any of these positions of power at the time. And yet somehow slavery ended. So whites did end slavery, did they not? Overwhelmingly, and of course it was overwhelmingly Republicans that did that. They don't like to give them any credit too. I was going to go over the first black representatives in the Congress. All of them were Republicans, by the way. They never tell you that either. Again, it destroys the narrative. They don't want you to know that. Folks, hope you enjoyed this show. Hope you'll share it with some friends. Hope you learned something from the show today as well. Please make sure you share it with others. I do appreciate when you do that. And I will catch you tomorrow in the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy, and God bless.